I used to think that if your slacker boob was there one time, it was going to be the slacker boob forever, but cannot say enough how much stress will inhibit your milk production. Building up my milk supply, building up my freezer stash, I just never had that. Probably spent $100 to $150 extra on just supplements trying to allot milk supply. Hey y'all, I'm Amy from the Harris Homestead and welcome back to my channel. I am a mom of two, so today I want to share with y'all some tips that have helped me have two successful breastfeeding and nursing journeys with my children. So I have breastfed both of my children. I breastfed my son for 13 months and I'm still currently breastfeeding my daughter. There was about a 5-month gap between the two babies where I wasn't nursing, but I was pregnant. So I just want to offer you a few tips that have helped me along this journey. I will admit our first breastfeeding journey, like many moms with their first child, was a bit difficult. So I'm going to share with you some things that I changed this time around that have made it much less stressful and much easier on myself and my daughter breastfeeding. So number one, it will get easier. If you're an expectant mama and you're nervous about breastfeeding and the challenges you may face, just know it gets easier. And if you're already in that postpartum time struggling with breastfeeding in those first few weeks or months, know that it does get easier. You are learning a new skill if you've never done this before. Your baby is learning how to feed off of you. You're just learning how everything works and you're learning to get to know each other. So just be patient with it. If breastfeeding is something that you really want to do, just be patient with it and just push through the challenging times. It gets so much easier when they're a little older and bigger, 3-4 months, and just a beautiful relationship. So just stick with it if that's something you really want to do. It does get easier. So number two, it is going to hurt up front. I wish I could say that it's never going to hurt or that each pregnancy gets a little easier with the pain, which I think it does, but my first breastfeeding journey was quite painful at the beginning, as well as my second breastfeeding journey this time around. So just push through. If it's something you really want to do, you can push through the pain. You can get through anything for a short amount of time. Just like you got through labor and the contractions and you breathed through it and you kept your eye on the prize, the same thing here. Your baby is getting beautiful, nourishing milk from you. So just close your eyes, breathe through the pain. It will diminish as the nursing session goes on, and it definitely will diminish as the months go on and you continue breastfeeding. For me, I always felt pain on my left side more than my right side, so every time my baby would latch to the left, I felt just a little bit of pain, and I just kind of had to close my eyes and just try not to wince up and just breathe through it. And once my babies were completely latched, it kind of just went away throughout the nursing session. I've never had any trouble with pain on my right side, so it's kind of odd. And a little fun fact, each of my breastfeeding journeys, I've had a slacker boob. So my first breastfeeding journey, my left side was the slacker, and I always got more milk from the right when I would pump and feed my baby. Now it's opposite. So if any of you have experienced opposite slacker boobs in different pregnancies, please let me know in the comments down below. I used to think that if your slacker boob was there one time, it was going to be the slacker boob forever, but that has not been the case for me. They've completely swapped this time around. Number three, it's normal not to have a huge freezer stash. If you are exclusively breastfeeding your baby and pumping here and there on the side, it is normal to get half an ounce, a quarter, 3/4 of an ounce or two at each nursing session. Your body is making milk for your baby, and then you're just trying to get a little bit of extra milk out to store. So don't stress if you're not getting the huge 3, 4, 5 ounces that you see some mamas get on social media. We should never compare ourselves to others on social media. It's easy to do. Just know it is normal not to have a huge freezer stash. So a little bit of my personal story. With my first child, I had to almost immediately start pumping and supplementing with a bottle. He was having some weight gain issues, having trouble getting a good latch and staying latched and extracting the milk from my breast. So I started pumping like almost immediately. I was using the Haka, I was using my breast pump, and getting just so frustrated and stressed that I was not seeing those huge amounts of milk that so many mamas post pictures of and say, building up my milk supply, building up my freezer stash. I just never had that. The most I could ever pump at one time, I think, was about 2 ounces then. Another part of it was stress, which I'll talk about later. Now this time around, we aren't having to supplement our daughter, but I did want to start pumping and getting a freezer stash going for when I did have to go back to work for a couple weeks and just for if I ever had to leave her. I was much less stressed about it. I just pumped what I could, put it in the freezer, and it was just so much of a more beautiful experience. I cannot say enough how much stress will inhibit your milk production. So right now, I probably, in the first 2 to 3 months of her life, I only probably had about 50 or 60 ounces in the freezer, which sounds like a lot, but think about it. A baby's gonna drink 20 to 25 ounces in a day as they get older. So 50 or 60 ounces in the freezer is not that much, so don't stress over a low freezer stash. Most moms produce just enough for what their babies need. They don't produce an oversupply, and that is definitely my case. I'm definitely not an oversupplier. So number 4, it is going to get easier with each pregnancy. Not only is the actual nursing session going to get easier, but your milk supply is going to probably grow. At least it was in my case. I've read some studies on moms who had a really strugglesome time their first time around breastfeeding, and they had a much easier time breastfeeding the second baby, and that has definitely been the case for us. We struggled for 2 or 3 or 4 months with my first son, and it's just been great from the beginning with my daughter the second time around. So I think that is due to the fact that with each subsequent pregnancy, your body creates more milk ducts just to prepare it for the breastfeeding that is ahead. So at least that has been the case for me. I can't attest to all women, but for me, I had a really strugglesome first time breastfeeding, and the second time has been so much easier. Number 5, supply and demand, water, and good food. Those are really the only 3 things that are going to help your milk supply to grow or to regulate it or just to get it where you want it. All those fancy pills and formulas and supplements are great, but it really just boils down to supply and demand. When you get milk out of your body, it's going to know to produce more milk, whether it's from your baby sucking or from you pumping. And then just keeping up with water. You don't have to drink tons and tons, 2 or 3 gallons of water a day. I did think that the first time around, but really just listen to your thirst. Your body is going to give you a cue when you're thirsty. Just stay hydrated. I do keep a bottle of water near me at all times. Speaking of, I forgot to bring my water up here when I filmed this video. Just keep water on you. Just sip it throughout the day. You don't have to be chugging water or tracking your water. And then you also need to be eating a whole foods diet. To produce breast milk, you need a high nutrient dense diet, high in calories, high in fat, high in just like really good nutrients. You need about 300 to 500 extra calories a day to breastfeed. So this is not the time to restrict calories. This is not the time to go on this crazy diet. You need that nutrition to be able to produce that milk for your baby. So in my experience, the first time around, I bought all of the lactation foods, the lactation pills, the lactation supplements that are geared to boost your breast milk. None of it worked. Don't waste your money. You may see a little bit of an increase, but it really just boils down to supply and demand and feeding your body and keeping it nourished and hydrated. Probably spent $100 to $150 extra on just supplements trying to unlock milk supply. Once you understand that concept of supply and demand, your milk is just gonna regulate itself and make exactly what it needs for your baby. So number 6, fully empty one breast when you're feeding your baby before switching to the other side. This is something I did not do correctly with my first baby, and I think it led to many of his weight gain issues. I would feed him on one side, and as soon as he got fidgety or wiggly, I would just think he was done and would switch him to the other side. And this would just go on and on for the whole nursing session. I would go back and forth, really not having a clue what I was doing. If your baby is not emptying one breast each time, they're not going to be getting that fatty or hind milk that they need to gain weight and grow. And I think this was one of the issues with his weight gain, is he was only getting that fore milk, the more watery, thirst-quenching milk right at the beginning, and then when he got a little satisfied, he would pull off. I was switching to the other side, he would get a little bit of that fore milk, and then it was just back and forth. So he was never fully empty and getting that really thick, fatty hind milk that our babies need to gain weight and to grow. Number 7, if you are going to pump and supplement, I recommend one or both of these 2 items. I absolutely hate an electric pump. So what I personally do is the first few weeks I use the Haka, and then after that, when I get a little more milk and I want to get it out a little bit faster, I use this hand pump. So the Haka is great at the beginning because you're really not gonna have a lot to pump. You're just gonna have that colostrum. So if the baby is nursing on one side, you would just simply pop the Haka on the other, let it suction, and then it is gonna catch your letdown. So it's not really pumping for you, but it's more or less suctioning and just having a little bit of drip of milk. So this is great in the beginning when you don't really have a huge milk supply yet, especially those first couple weeks when your milk is just coming in. So then I switched to this. So this is also great. I use it when my baby is nursing, really just in the morning times when I'm really full, when I know she's not going to empty both breasts during that nursing session. So this is how I've built up a lot of my very small freezer stash. So what I do is I feed her on one side, I turn her in this long waist position as I sit, and then I hook this on. Now I do have special flanges. This is not the flange that comes with this. I just use these from Pump and Pout. So you'll hook this on and then you just pump. And I love this because you can kind of regulate it. When you hold it down like this, it's really going to extract the milk, and then when you let go, it will fall. So I use this in the morning times when I'm feeding my baby and she's on one side and I want to go ahead and empty the other, because I know that my breasts are really full in the mornings and she's not going to empty both breasts at one nursing session. So I use this in the morning. I also use this if I'm in the vehicle and I don't want to hook up the electric pump, which I hate using the electric pump. So if my husband's driving, I just use this to pump. I'll link both of these down below. So my 8th and final tip is to feed baby on demand. I've already mentioned that I'm not an oversupplier. I don't have a surplus of milk. So feeding baby on demand really keeps my body making and creating more milk for her to drink. So I do feed her every 2 to 3 hours, but if she wants to feed in between there, I don't turn her down. If you feed by a schedule, that is wonderful, but for myself personally, keeping my milk supply up, feeding on demand works best for us. So if you do struggle with a lower or just normal milk supply, feeding on demand is going to be the best way to keep that milk supplied. So those are my tips for a successful breastfeeding journey. I've now done this twice and I hope to do it several more times as the Lord blesses us with more children. So if you are a new mom or an expectant mom and truly want to breastfeed, just stick with it. It will get easier. It will come naturally as the time progresses, and it will just become a very natural, beautiful bonding experience with you and your baby. So thank y'all so much for watching today. I hope some of these tips have helped you out if you're a breastfeeding mama, and just know that you are wonderful, you are amazing, and you are the best mama for your baby. Thank y'all for watching. Bye.